5 years. The family is a very strong unit in Brazil, but this population explosion is bound to put heavy strains on that and other spiritual values of the people. Brazil is a deeply religious country. It has been called the most Catholic nation of our times. The reach of the church is so extensive that its touch is soft, and yet its influence is pervasive. This is a Mass being celebrated in Bahia, which has the highest concentration of people with Negro blood. Were the church in São Paulo or further south in Porto Alegre, there most of the faces would be white, but the atmosphere would be the same. There is every possibility that Brazil may become a model to the rest of the world of people of different colors and different roots getting on. For they do mix, and they do get on, and it is part of their sense of national self to do so. This is not to say that Negroes are not disadvantaged. They are. They began as slaves. They have further to come. Most of them start low in economic advantage, in schooling, in the chance of social mobility. There's an old Brazilian saying, the darker the skin, the lower the class. The lighter the skin, the higher the class. But there are other sayings. Money whitens the skin. Also, people say, there is no racial discrimination, only social discrimination, which means, among other things, that there is a greater gap between middle class and poor than any gap of color. Partly, this social easiness may come from the gentle teachings of the church. Partly, it may come from the fact that the first Portuguese settlers were easy in the matter of race and interbred in a way that produced society having many shades of color. One thing is certain. If the nation is to prosper, people of all races and colors will be needed, and being needed is a great advantage. Considering the mixture of people making up Brazil, Portuguese settler stock, Indians, Negroes, Germans, Italians, Poles, Japanese, and more, one might wonder that any connecting national consciousness exists, yet there is one, and it is very strong. With minor exceptions, Portuguese is the language spoken from one corner of the country to another. There is a patriotism, as seen in this independence celebration in Bahia, which appears to help the people weather social and political difficulty. In 1822, Brazil passed from being a colony to being a constitutional monarchy without any war for independence from Portugal. In 1889, the monarchy became a republic in name and an oligarchy in practice, again without any battles. In 1930, under Getulio Vargas, the nation became a dictatorship. In 1946, it became a democracy. Politically, this sounds like a turbulent mixture indeed. And yet, all these changes have been made with little or no bloodshed. The country appears to have an enormous power to go peaceably on, adapting to new conditions. It is fortunate, if this be so, for changes of a sort to put great strain on the temper and habits of some sectors of the community appear to be necessary if the revolution is to have any meaning. The inflation may be only a symptom of deeper troubles, but it stands at the core of national life. In a nation which does not enforce its tax laws, the easiest way to pay the bills is to print more money. Once the government thinks that way, everyone has to think that way, if they are to go on eating. So all of life becomes a marketplace where everyone is trying to sell something with one hand and manipulate credit with the other. If the money's going to be worth less next month, it pays to buy on credit. If enough people buy on credit, the money has got to be worth less next month. In the end, it is to the interest of many people to keep the currency deteriorating. How is this to be brought to a halt? Will the poor themselves as well as the rich have to tighten their belts? Economist Ronald Carlson.
Well, it's going to have to be both, probably. The real burden of the last 10 years has fallen upon the middle and lower income people because of the inflation. Inflation makes the rich richer and the poor poorer. It's a kind of taxation on the wage earner because he lives with a wage fixed for a single year, and meanwhile the cost of living rises like this. Meanwhile prices rise. This means the industrial sector is defending itself beautifully against inflation. They can raise prices like this. But the poor guy on the payroll, he's sitting there until his union gets him an increase. So if something could be done to arrest the inflation rate, then we'll get a distribution of income, which is now cockeyed, right, in favor of certain industrial groups because of their position, and will be put it back more towards an equilibrium level. These poor guys down the line, the middle and lower income groups, will not have half of their income taken away from them by inflation.
In the southern part of Brazil, there stands a city which seems to belong to a different world from the softer, slower cities of the north. It is São Paulo. São Paulo is as dynamic as Chicago. It reaches for the sky like New York. In 1875, this city had a population of 25,000 people. Today, its population is in the neighborhood of 5 million. Its birth as a huge metropolis was founded on efficient farming, which led to surplus capital, which was invested in industry. It is the southern part of Brazil which has drawn the European immigrant, bringing his industrial skills and his sense of what is a proper standard of living. This sounds like progress until one reflects that Brazil is inveterately backward in agricultural methods and has to go on importing food. And until one reflects that São Paulo itself was founded on a sound agriculture that produced not deficit, but surplus. It is not disparaging São Paulo's growth to consider that for this to continue, the rest of the nation may have to be helped to catch up. Industrialization was speeded by the dictator Vargas, who resolved to turn Brazil into a nation which could manufacture the consumer goods it needed. The Depression of the 30s and the war added impetus by impeding trade, and subsequent leaders have seconded the nationalist notion that most of the ingredients of life should bear the label "Made in Brazil." Paradoxically, it was only possible to do this by means of foreign investment, since Brazilian surplus capital was insufficient, and this has always been something of a sore point. Goulart had caused foreign investment almost completely to dry up. Now the new revolutionary government has opened the door again, taking steps to attract capital almost without regulation.
If you put capital, enterprise, money, know-how, etc. in the Northeast,
Hermano Alves, political editor of a paper which criticizes the new government, takes a nationalist viewpoint, demanding that foreign capital be controlled.
And so, just like Italy, when you invest money in the south of Italy, you have more advantage than investing money in the north of Italy. And so we want the control of our development. We don't want our development to be controlled by the interests of private enterprise, of foreign private enterprise. If we are trying to control the development and the actions of the Brazilian Brazilian enterprise, why can't we control the activities of foreign investors? That's our point of view, our opinion. And when an American or a European enterprise comes in conflict of interest with a state enterprise or a Brazilian enterprise, and so we say we must give support to our national enterprise, even if private or state enterprise. That's our opinion, our frank opinion.
The whole humanity is confronted with two alternatives only. We can choose to live according to the Christian moral and the Western way of living, or we can choose to live under complete controlled governments.
Paulo Iris, a Sao Paulo industrialist, takes the view of an internationalist.
A few other countries. I believe very strongly that the whole people in this side of the world still prefers freedom, liberty, and still values the Christian morals, Christian moral principles as the principles to live for, to fight for. So I think that the only thing we can do is to prove to the whole world that our conception of life is better. And we can only do that by learning that from now on we're living a new reality, a reality which imposes to all of us the duty to work for the things we have been preaching. And we have been preaching for one world. And so we must start by building one continent, one group of peaceful, progressive countries living together because they think not only along the same lines, they share the same ideals, but they really work for a much broader economy. I mean, nobody will be thinking about companies' problems or countries' problems, but continental problems. This would be a good start for all of us.
One of the things that irritates Brazilians about American investment is that there's so much of it. It's difficult to be international-minded if you have the feeling that you're not master of your own fate. In the state of Sao Paulo alone, there are about 500 million US dollars invested. Some companies are totally managed and run from home, with a responsibility only to US investors. Other companies, like the Willis plant in Sao Paulo, are capitalized in Brazil, run by Brazilians. This latter sort is more popular locally. However companies may be organized, Brazilian industry is impressive both for weight and diversity, also for the speed with which things get done. The whole automobile industry is about 7 years old. 7 years ago, these men did not have these skills. Nobody did. Foreign investment in Brazil has often relieved that nation of the task of evolving this or that industry. Skills and devices which may represent years of costly research and development elsewhere have been brought straight in and put to work.